Okay, good.
All right, so
So
now
technical
we're
difficulties.
figuring out, this is one of the problems of starting the hybrid meeting, because we have to remember how to do all the different things that need doing. So just to remind everyone, we need to start with good motivation. Please listen with the motivation of bodhicitta as we go through these teachings on the way of the Bodhisattva. So we started this cycle in the sequence of teachings in 2015. It was all live. We would have several years of all live, and we got through the 6th chapter with annual visits to Portland, and then we had a little bit of an interruption, shall we say. And then we had online teachings last year, totally online, and this year we're doing hybrid. We've come to the 8th chapter of the Way of the Bodhisattva. So we're getting there. And when we, I think when we started organizing it, thinking about this, it occurred to me that there was a little bit of trepidation in terms of actually hosting someone live in the Vajra Vidya Portland shrine room again after 2.5 years. And how are we going to handle it? Can we get all this? How are we going to set up all the cushions? And can we people listen online? And so it's like there's something that actually, on the one hand, has happened many times in the past, and it pretty much works, except for the addition of the computer and a few camera over here and people listening online. It's actually, in terms of serving me meals, you're serving me just as good meals this time as the last time. And this time you even have to do it longer because I'm here for 2 weeks. And, you know, picking me up at the bus station was exactly the same as like the last time I came here. So it's like, it's all sort of the same. Of course, it's totally different because anything only ever happens once. Everything's actually really completely new every time you do it. It's just this time, because it's been 2 years, it was like we're sensing that new aspect of it that wasn't there before. And so there's this little like, how do we do this? So like 2 years, 2.5, how long has it been? Over 2 years of the epidemic, and like this now coming together, and this, how do we do things? So we had a big shift 2 years ago when it's like everything has to happen online, and then we started making that shift, and people who had that trap, then it became old hat. Zoom became the way you do everything, right? And now this sort of hybrid model that we're doing now. And so I think it's important to start right now by actually, before we get into the text, we actually need to think about how incredibly fortunate we are. Just absolutely incredibly fortunate that we can do this now in a way where we're able to gather some of us in person. And I think we could fit more people here in person, really. I mean, we do have to be careful with the epidemic. I'm not going to say we should just go ahead and do everything, because we have to be careful. But you know, we're here, and people are doing. You know, if you're listening online and that's where you're more comfortable, that's excellent too. You know, you don't have to feel like you have to come in. This is the beauty of it. We can do it online. I just have to know whether I need to look at the camera or whether to look at people. It's like, where am I going to look? Which camera am I going to look at? And so, but we have this opportunity to once again gather and talk about the Dharma. And this is an incredibly rare opportunity. Sometimes we kind of lose track of how rare and precious it is. And perhaps it's even more commonplace feeling over the last couple of years, because we've discovered that we can get so much on Zoom and YouTube and teachings from all sorts of masters. Siddhartha Rinpoche's taught a lot on time, the Karma has taught a whole lot on time, Garbchen Rinpoche, all these other people's, Mingyur Rinpoche. There's just teachings all over on YouTube and Zoom, and people are getting all sorts of teachings. And so it seems like, oh, we can get all these Dharma teachings. This is just absolutely historically unprecedented. And we have to remember how incredibly fortunate we are to be able to get any Dharma teaching at all, let alone the plethora of teachings that we can get now. This is just incredible. I mean, until very recently, if you were going to get a teaching, you had to go to where the teacher was. And you had to hope that it wasn't too big a teaching, because if you were sitting too far away, you couldn't hear them because there were no microphones. Right? This isn't too long ago. In Tibet, when they had teachings, they had translators positioned every few feet. Translator would listen to the Lama, turn around and shout out what he had said, and the next translator would turn around and shout out what that translator said all the way back to the back of the crowd. In the time of the Buddha was extraordinary, because the Buddha would teach, and they had the quality of the voice with the 60 qualities, or the 60 traits of Brahma, where everyone could hear clearly in their own language. But since then, we haven't had anyone else who's really been able to do that quite so easily as the Buddha. So, I mean, the fact that, first of all, I mean, even in those times, if you could even get to the point where you could hear a single teaching of Dharma, I mean, this is just like so incredibly rare. Let's not think about other realms. If we just think about the human realm, you know, if you were in, you know, for the first several hundred years of Buddhism, you had to happen to be in India, in an area where the Buddhism had spread for the first 200 or 300 years, which wasn't a whole lot of places. Then under Ashoka, the Buddhism spread all over, and more people could get Dharma teachings, and more people could go forth as monks and nuns, more people could support the monks and nuns and as lay people and do some Dharma practice, receive teachings and so forth. But it's still, you know, outside of India, no. Then it gradually spread to other countries, first down south to Sri Lanka, and then up to the northwestern regions of present-day Afghanistan and the Gandhara and those areas. But still, you know, like we talk about the Egyptian Empire, all those other great ancient empires, the Roman Empire, all those. There are a few Greeks who made it across to India and had some exposure to Buddhism in the time of Alexander, but Buddhism didn't really come back. So everyone in the entire Roman Empire, Africa, East Asia, just absolutely no chance to even hear the word Dharma, the word Buddha, let alone. And here we are, look at how much we have. And people all over the world, so it's an incredible fortune that we have right now. We have to really appreciate this fortune, just because, like, if we don't appreciate it, it's like, yeah, I could watch a Dharma teaching today, or I could do Netflix. Oh, no one's doing Netflix anymore. They're kind of tanking, aren't they? Well, I hope that doesn't happen to Dharma teachings, you know, because it's a danger. I could, you know, which Dharma, I don't know which Dharma teaching I want to do. What flavor? Should I do a Theravada teaching today? You know? Because there's so much we're going to take it for granted. We won't actually really treasure what is just an incredible gift that we have. So it's just that we have this plethora of Dharma. And then, you know, we've had here, if you think about it, here in Portland, Maine, and most of you watching are, you know, Mainers. So we are here in Portland, and this kind of incredible stroke of good fortune that Trungpa Rinpoche happened to come here. I mean, connections to people inviting Rinpoche, and he actually came. And not just once, but many years. And so many of us, you know, we got, like Steve was saying at the beginning, that's been 20 years since you've known me. And it's like that, like one of my early exposures to Buddhism was coming to the tent retreat here in 1998. And so that's Rinpoche's second year here, I believe. And the fact that such a great master would come, came for so many years, every year until what, 2009 or 2010, except for 1 year when he stayed on a retreat. And this incredible fortune that we had that Rinpoche actually came, and so we had this opportunity to do this. We have to remember that and appreciate it. And then there are people who are newer and who are listening, and because Rinpoche came, and also because of all the other people who have come to Maine and all the what do we say, all the different opportunities that, you know, a lot of people have come through Maine. Rinko Tukul has come through many times, and Zikr Contra Rinpoche and other teachers are continually coming. And I'm sure there are teachers in other traditions that I just don't know about. A lot of teachers. And so there's a lot of exposure here in Maine. And think of this, you know, 50 years ago, you know, it's not what people did in Maine. All right. And so we're here at a time when Dharma has spread here in this place, and we've all managed to make a connection, you know, and it wasn't much better in New Hampshire where I was living 20 years, 25 years ago too, you know. So this, we have to really appreciate this. And then, you know, so everything was kind of growing and developing along, and then all of a sudden in 2020, an epidemic started. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? And then somehow, you know, we've managed to find new opportunities connecting through digital means that have really opened up a lot of things. But it's different when you're teaching over Zoom or when you're looking over people. It's much harder to look at the camera, and especially when I have actual physical people to look at. Now I have to remember to sometimes look at the camera, and I don't even know, I've got two cameras. Which camera should I look at? I still don't know. So, you know, it's like, how do we, but we have all these things that we have to look at and think about and figure out how to deal with. We managed to do it over the 2 years. And, you know, this period of the epidemic has been, I mean, it's been a hard time for a lot of people in various types of isolation, especially at the beginning when many people were locked down and depending on your living situation, we were kind of deprived contact. And it was different in different countries. In England, it was quite harsh for a while, except for the Prime Minister. And in China, it's very harsh in Wuhan, and it's still very harsh and hard in Shanghai. And I think they're starting some lockdowns in Beijing as well. And so people deprived of their contact in ways. And then people who got sick, and you know, COVID is not a fun illness. It's not, I don't recommend it to anyone, not even a light case. Please take care of yourselves, be careful about what you're doing, because it's still a danger, even if you've had the shots. It's not as much of a danger if you've had the shots, but it's still, you have to be careful. So it's, you know, which is good, why everyone's listening online, for one of the reasons, because we have to be careful of this. So, and we have to recognize that there have been a lot of people who've suffered really quite terribly in the epidemic. And in the monasteries in India and Nepal, and not so much in Bhutan, but in India and Nepal, especially, the great suffering, a lot of illness that went around. In our Trangu monastery in India and Nepal, we didn't have anyone who passed away, but we had several monks who spent weeks in the hospital. There are other places. The chief abbot of Rumtek Monastery at Khenpo David almost died. But he came through the blessings of 3 jewels. It's very fortunate that he did, because it would have been a tremendous loss to lose, you know, such a wonderful person. Lama Shirap Gyaltsen, whom Neshang Lama, who had a great, one nice Lama, a good Lama who had a good monastery in Nepal, Tempe Gyaltsen, the Vajra master from Surmo Monastery, they all passed away because of COVID. So there's a lot of loss in all lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, and a lot of ordinary monks and nuns who got sick. Some of them probably passed away. I mean, I'm not going to be able to, I mean, only the ones who are well known are their names really publicized. And so there's a big toll in terms of this, in terms of people whom I know casually or well. And I'm sure that many of you have known people who have gotten very sick. Some of you may know people who've passed away from COVID too. And in the United States, there, 900,000 people have passed away of COVID in the last couple of years. So this is really something we have to remember. But all of us are still here. If we had passed away from COVID, if they had not been able to develop shots the way they did so quickly, and then start distributing the shots and get them to people as quickly as they did. I mean, this would have been like the flu epidemic of 1918, where far more millions of people, I mean, COVID is bad. Millions of people have died of COVID around the world. But I think the influenza of 1918 killed many more millions at a time when the world population was smaller. So that's an incredible fortune that we have, that this epidemic came at a time when our society was able to mobilize in a way that protected a lot of people, more so in the developed societies than in the undeveloped places. And there's still a lot of suffering in places that's not reported as COVID because the people can't afford to get tests. But still, we're here. We have survived the 2 years. And we're able to hear the Dharma. This is an incredible thing. We're able to listen and think about the Dharma. So we should appreciate this. It's like an incredible stroke of good fortune. And then when we think about, it's not just, the fortune of being human. There are billions of animals for every single human being on this planet, let alone all the other planets and other places that beings live. And for every animal, there are billions and billions of hungry ghosts, it is said, although we can't see them. And for every hungry ghost, there are billions and billions of beings in the hells. So the magnitude of the number of sentient beings who are in just absolutely dreadful situations is incredible. And the fact that we're in really, especially in developed societies, fairly cushy positions is just something we should be extremely thankful for. We should appreciate. We have this great opportunity. So we actually won the lottery to become a human, and not just to be a human, but to be here at a place in a time when the Dharma has spread and we could contact the Dharma. And we have survived long enough to hear, talk and listen more about the Dharma, to think about the Dharma, to practice the Dharma. And this is just incredible. We should just be absolutely delighted that we have this opportunity tonight to speak of the Dharma and to do it in person. It's just a really wonderful opportunity we have. And it's so nice to see everyone either live or on your Zoom. So we just have to appreciate that great opportunity we have. I think that's the main thing. Once we have to appreciate that opportunity, when we appreciate that opportunity, we also have to remember that, this is not going to last forever. There's so much uncertainty in the world. The pandemic is not over. We don't know how that's going to go. There's the war in Ukraine. We don't know how that's going to go or what's going to happen. We don't know. And then there are all the various things that could happen to us individually, and we have no idea what's going to happen to us tonight or even tomorrow. There's a prayer by Mikya Dorje. It's so amazing that I haven't died yet. There's no assurance I won't die tonight. This hard-headed being who is so attached to this life, please, Jules, grant your blessings. Bless me so that I'll be able to devote myself day and night to the practice of virtue. Grasp me with compassion. So we have to take the opportunity we have. It's short, we have this opportunity now, so we've got to think about it, appreciate it, and actually do what we can to make this life meaningful. And just the fact that some of you have actually come here tonight, that some of you have tuned in tonight, this is a sign that you're all actually doing something to make life meaningful. So we should appreciate that. Really appreciate it. I mean, the fortune. I mean, for myself, I feel like I've been in such a fortunate position ever since I first met Rinpoche, even since before, really since my birth. I've been in a very fortunate position in many ways. And if I don't do something good now, what's going to come of it in the future? This could all end tomorrow or before. So we've got to use this opportunity now to do what we can to make hay while the sun shines, to use the opportunity to do something to make our lives meaningful. And so this is we should appreciate this. This is the precious human. Basically we're talking about the precious human body, with its pleasures and resources, and how rare it is, how difficult it is to get. When you think about it, how does it apply to my life right now? We haven't died yet. We've got some time to do something if we're diligent. And there's some great things that we can do. We have this contact. So we need to make use of this time that we have. So I just wanted to start out this evening by speaking about that, because I think it's easy to remember that, easy to forget that. And then when we remember what a great fortune we have and you decide you want to do, then there's a lot of reason to be actually completely optimistic and joyful and courageous about it. There is something we can do. We can do the same things that any of the great masters. You hear the names of the great masters, male, female, it doesn't matter. You've got the Karmapa and Trungpa Rinpoche, of course, from my own personal connections. You've got Khenpo Rinpoche, Jetsunma, the Sakya Jetsunma, and all these other great masters. And how did they begin? I mean, how did the Buddha begin? How did the Buddha go from being just an ordinary person like us to becoming a Buddha? It's because the Buddha decided he wanted to do it, right? And then he gradually went through the path, lifetime over lifetime, sometimes born as a human, sometimes born as an animal, sometimes born male, sometimes born female, always with the aim, I want to achieve enlightenment. From the time he had first developed the motivation, I want to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. From that point on, no matter what form he took, he had that motivation, and that brought him to eventually achieve enlightenment. Or you can think about, if you think about Trungpa Rinpoche, at some point, there was the first Trungpa Rinpoche, who was just a regular Tibetan guy in the 15th century, who happened to have the good fortune to become a monk and then meet the 7th Karmapa, become a student of the 7th Karmapa, receive teachings and gain realization of them. And because he did that, then the 7th Karmapa had him found Trungpa Monastery. Then he became the Trungpa Rinpoche. And then here we are with the 9th Trungpa Choephel, Khenpo Trungpa Rinpoche, right? So how is it? It's that first Trungpa Rinpoche, that first Trungpa Tulku, decided, I need to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. And then because of that, he was able to do this. He was able to go along the path. And all of us have the same potential. There are people, we shouldn't underestimate our potential. You can read stories about, like you read the stories about Milarepa surviving in the mountain, doing tummo practice, with the motivation of bodhicitta, doing tummo practice and keeping himself warm while he was basically naked, with just like a thin cotton robe that he didn't even bother to wear properly most of the time. Sitting on a rock naked in a cave, in a high altitude, doing tummo practice. You think, I could never do that. Well, there are people just like you who are learning how to do Dharma practice and are developing heat. They're just like you. They're no different from you. They've decided they want to learn. They got the instructions and they're doing it. There's nothing that we can't do ourselves if we put our mind to it. Now, just learning how to do Tummo practice on its own is neither here nor there if you don't do it with a good motivation and proper instruction. The point is that ordinary people like us can go through all the stages of the path. We can develop the qualities. We can do the things that we think to ourselves are impossible. You think it's impossible to develop heat? Well, you talk to someone who says, well, I'm having this problem. I'm sweating in my practice. Just as excellent, you don't want to say that because you don't want them to get too, it's like, that's right. This is what happens. People do the practices. And if you do them right under the guidance of a good Lama who gives you the instruction, you can actually do these things. We have the opportunity to do it. There's nothing we can't do if we put our minds to it and actually devote ourselves to doing it, right? So this is, so another thing that we should just be delighted to. We have this absolutely great opportunity to get these precious instructions. There are people who are getting instructions and who are getting enlightened now in the 21st century. They're never going to admit it. Because they're getting enlightened, they're never going to admit it. They're going to say, oh yeah, my teacher, he comes through these. Oh no, I don't really know anything. Like our Drupin Khenpo Labu at the Seka Retreat Center, he's a really good retreat master, very hard. If you're fortunate enough to go there and get in, and he puts you through your paces, but people have results. Sometimes he makes jokes about some of the retreatants, and you can tell from the jokes that he makes that he's really impressed with what they're doing. And if he's impressed, well, that's something. And we can all do that too. All of us can do that. We all have the potential to do that. These are people, who, Steve was overly kind about me. There are people who started out, I know a couple of really good translators who started out as they were both from England, and they both started out as what do we say? Like ne'er-do-wells, hoodlums, drinking problems, dropped out of school, no education. And they met teachers and they followed the instructions, and now they're really good translators. They do so much for the teachings. They didn't have the advantage of they're like university dropouts. One on a drinking tour of Tibet almost fell off a mountain and killed himself and started to think about things, and then met or whatever, and it becomes an amazing person. This is something we can do if we take the advantage of the opportunities we have. So that's the main thing. We've got these great opportunities, and we can do that. We can take advantage of them. So here we are. We have this. We've had a 2-year hiatus of any in-person teachings here in Portland, and now we're starting up again. We're doing hybrid, which is really good because for all of you who, I don't know, I've got 2 cameras. Let's look at the main one here. So all of you who are listening here, the fact that you're not here is good. Of course, I'd love to have more people in the room because it's kind of fun when you have the energy of people in the room. But the important thing is you're listening to the teachings. It's excellent. This is wonderful. You're doing it in a way that you feel comfortable with. This is excellent and wonderful. This is just perfect. To anything you can do to listen to the teachings and take the opportunity that we have now, it's just absolutely wonderful. So it doesn't matter if you are here or if you're listening, if you're taking this to mind and you're thinking about it and feeling like, oh, I need to do this myself, right? This is what we have to do. We have such a wonderful opportunity, so we need to take advantage of it. So that's kind of Before we get into the text, I just wanted to go over like this. What kind of prompted this is that yesterday morning I woke up and I looked at my phone. I had a message. Oh, there's this little talk by Rinpoche that needs to be translated. And then I had other things that I was working on all day, and it was like 8:30 at night last night. It's like, uh-oh, I forgot about that little talk. Fortunately, it was only 2 minutes long. I hope they put it on YouTube. They might put it on YouTube sometime in the next year or two. They're in Nepal, at our monastery in Nepal, they're having the annual Mani Drupchen for the first time in 2 years. They're actually able to hold it in person. And it's apparently going very well. And Rinpoche recorded a video message. Of course, Rinpoche is not able to go in person, but he recorded a video message and he just thanked everyone in it for coming and participating. And it just made me think about one of the things that Rinpoche often does when he starts teaching is he often reminds us of how fortunate we are. What a great opportunity we have. He doesn't blow on about it quite as long as I do. He doesn't blow on about it. I blow on about it. You know, but you know, and it just made it occur to me, wow, this is really what we need to talk about right now before we get into the way of the Bodhisattva. Of course, we need to talk about that too. But that's the main thing I wanted to share with you tonight. But we do need to get into the actual text. So it's my time for the show and tell. This is the book we're going through. The Way of the Bodhisattva. I think I did this last year when we had the online teaching last year too. So we'll be going through the 8th chapter of Entering the Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. So to remind ourselves of where we are in the way of the Bodhisattva, there are 10 chapters. But if you look at it, you can kind of summarize it into 3 different, well, 2 main parts. The first part is rousing bodhicitta, and then the second, rousing bodhicitta, which means the steps of, you know, becoming interested in bodhicitta and then taking the bodhisattva vow. And then once you've taken the bodhisattva vow, how do you actually practice it? So these are covered over the 10 chapters. So the first part about how to rouse bodhicitta is what's covered in the first 3 chapters. And the first chapter is the chapter on the benefits of bodhicitta, thinking about the benefits of bodhicitta. Because if you understand the benefits of bodhicitta, then you get excited about it. You want to take the bodhisattva vow. Right? That's the first step, getting excited about things. Thinking about the benefits, like the similes of it being like the banana tree, or unlike the banana tree that only gives fruit once, it's like the wish fulfilling tree that provides benefit for forever. Then there's the process. The second and third chapters taken together give the ritual for actually taking the bodhisattva vow. So we covered those in 2015. Then once you've taken the bodhisattva vow, there's, well, how do you actually keep the bodhisattva vow? Well, you have to practice the 6 transcendences, the 6 paramitas, the 6 transcendences: you know, generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, meditation, and prajna. And so these are covered in the rest of the book. Well, generosity is not given its own separate chapter. It's kind of covered in different places in the rest of the book. So once after you've taken the bodhisattva vow, there's the teachings on carefulness, which are basically about teaching about how to really value the bodhisattva vow. Because when you value something, you're going to be careful of it, right? So how do you think about bodhisattva vow? It's like if you have something you really care about, you take good care of it. If you value something, you take good care of it. So similarly, if you value the bodhisattva vow and value the precepts of the bodhisattva practice, then you'll take care of it and will actually do something to practice it. So that's the basis for all the practices, the transcendences. And then there's a chapter on discipline, which is called awareness, a chapter on patience. Last year, we covered the chapter on diligence. Diligence is a zest for virtue, right? Being excited about being diligent, about doing your Dharma practice. So then once you are diligent, well, what are you diligent about doing? Well, you're diligent about doing meditation. So that's where we come to in this 8th chapter, the chapter on meditation. The Sanskrit word is dhyana. Dhyana it's kind of got two meanings. It's somewhat of a general word for meditation, but it's also a specific type of meditation. It's a specific type of meditation where you withdraw from what you do is you abandon all attachment to the realm of desire, the realm that we're in, and then you develop a very stable shamatha meditation. And then there are successively deeper and deeper stages of these where you have more and more powerful meditation as you go through the 4 different levels of dhyana meditation, through the 4 levels of the form realm. I'm speaking too much about the Abhidharma now, I'm sorry. This is so it's that specific meditation. So generally when we say dhyana, we're talking about shamatha meditation. And when we talk about the 8th chapter, the way of the Bodhisattva, then oftentimes people will say, well, this is teaching shamatha meditation. Well, actually, this chapter is teaching what we need to do to get into meditation. How do we prepare ourselves for meditation? What do we need to do with our external circumstances? What do we need to do with our mind in order to develop meditation? And then the main type of meditation that it teaches is not counting breath. That's one breath out, one breath in. Shamatha meditation. There's no meditation technique here. Not on shamatha meditation. In fact, what it teaches are the meditations on relative bodhicitta, the meditation on the quality of yourself and others, and the meditation on exchanging yourself and others. And in particular, that last section, the meditation on exchanging yourself from others, is like the basis for the Tibetan teachings on Lojong, which I know you've gone over many times, I think with Lama Kathy last winter. Mm-hmm. And so, well, that's next weekend, but we'll talk about the connection between the way of the Bodhisattva and the mind training teachings. How does it come out? What are the parts of the way of the Bodhisattva that talk about mind training? How does the teachings on the exchange of self and other in the way of the Bodhisattva relate to the mind training teachings? All right, so that's next weekend. This chapter is the longest chapter of the way of the Bodhisattva, and so there was no way to rush through. Well, I mean, I could have rushed through it in 5 lectures, but it wouldn't have been as good, and I wouldn't have had as much time to spend in Portland. So we're breaking it up into 2 different sections, the 2 different weeks. But so that's what we're talking about, developing doing primarily the main meditation that's discussed in this is the meditation of relative bodhicitta. So is this shamatha meditation or is it insight meditation? Which is it? Because generally when we talk about meditation, you've got 2 types, 2 general types. You've got shamatha meditation, which is pacifying the mind, I was going to say tranquilizing the mind, but it's not tranquilizing the mind. It's like it's making the mind more peaceful, workable, so that you can actually do things. Let your mind will rest where you want it to rest, so that you can actually stay in the comfort of meditation and focus your mind one-pointedly on the object of meditation. That's what we mean by shamatha meditation. Or is it insight meditation? And what do we mean by insight meditation? Insight meditation is where you gain insight into the actual nature of reality. There are, of course, different levels of insight meditation depending upon what level of reality we're speaking about. But that's next year, assuming we all survive. So, which is the meditation on relative bodhicitta? Well, actually, it's got aspects of both. Because when you are resting in bodhicitta meditation, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, when we're doing Tonglen meditation, what are we doing? Your mind is resting one-pointedly on that focus of breathing in the suffering and the causes of suffering of all sentient beings, breathing out all your virtue, giving it all the way to other sentient beings. you're resting on this one pointedly, that is shamatha, right? Not only that, I think as we do the Tonglen meditation, then when you come back to doing shamatha meditation, you find that that compassion helps you be more stable when you're just doing shamatha meditation, right? I remember years ago, probably in 1999, I went to a teaching by Tsoknyi Rinpoche. He said there are two types of juice we need in meditation: compassion and devotion, like apple juice and orange juice. It's like that juice for your meditation. You get yourself your vitamin C for your motivation, for your compassion, right? So in that respect, the meditation on relative bodhicitta has this very strong aspect of shamatha, right? But it's not just shamatha, because when you're meditating on relative bodhicitta and you are seeing the interdependence, looks to us from our own ordinary worldly perspective, it looks like there's me and there's everyone else, and it's me who's important. And you do the meditations on relative bodhicitta, on the quality of self and other, you realize that you and all of the ascension beings are absolutely the same, and there's no reason to care for your own needs any more than you care for anyone else's needs. And so this is seeing better than nature. When you do the meditation on the exchanging oneself from other, you have to work with interdependence of beings. So interdependence of ourselves and others, and how we are all together. What are we grasping at as me? What is not me? And so this is looking to see the interdependence. So both of these bring us to understand interdependence. And interdependence is just another word for emptiness. It's just another way of looking at emptiness. And so in this way, when we do the meditations on relative bodhicitta that are taught here in the way of the Bodhisattva, or that are taught in the Tibetan mind training teachings, it has this strong aspect of insight meditation too. So this chapter, though the title in Sanskrit, dhyana, would make you think that it's talking about shamatha meditation, and many commentators do explain it as primarily speaking about shamatha meditation, actually teaches both. It's teaching both shamatha and insight meditation. So this is the chapter that we are speaking about. Should I actually even open up the chapter tonight? I guess I better. A couple of verses in. So as it says in the first verse of the chapter, and I'm sorry for all of you online, I think I was a little bit lazy and distracted today, and I have not put together anything to show you online. Everyone assured me that you will have the book. So I hope you do. And if you don't, well, I'm sorry. Maybe I'll get myself inspired to do a little bit of, it shouldn't take me too long. I might be able to do a little bit tomorrow morning. So the first chapter, or the first stanza of the 8th chapter reads, after thus rousing diligence, settle your mind into samadhi. A person whose mind wanders perches between the fangs of the afflictions. So you have to be diligent. We spoke last year about the chapter on diligence. And so diligence is the enthusiasm or the zest for virtue, wanting to devote yourself to virtuous practice. So we need to devote ourselves to virtue, to doing virtuous practice. Well, if we're going to do virtuous practice, we also at the same time, we need to make sure that we are not going to be distracted. Because if you are distracted while you're doing your virtuous practice, then it's not going to actually work. Because what's going to happen when you get distracted in your virtuous practice? Well, at first, the distraction is going to be kind of minor, right? Something kind of neutral, and then it's going to go from that to something that's going to be a little bit afflicted, usually some sort of desire. I'm in Portland, the Speckled Axe, and they've got a new location. Oh, but you know, I went there this morning. It's not quite the same. It's that, what's that place with the Italian name? Steve's. Oh, that's got a really nice coffee. So you're thinking like that, and then you're getting your desires going, right? So then it goes from there, and your desires get more and more. Or you start thinking about something, and you are distracted, and you think about something that upsets you, and then you get angry. And so distraction leads to the afflictions. This is why it says a person whose mind wanders perches between the fangs of the afflictions. And once you're between the fangs of the afflictions, it's hard to get out. Once once they kind of got you there, you're stuck in this precarious position between the affliction's fangs. There's nothing you can really do about it if your mind wanders. So that's why we need to develop the, what do we say? Develop the ability for mind to just rest in shamatha meditation, to rest one pointedly on the focus. Because otherwise we're going to lose control and we're going to have the afflictions. And when you have the afflictions, then eventually you're going to act on the afflictions. And then when you act on the afflictions, you're just creating more suffering for yourself in the future. So this is why it is important for us to develop the ability to rest the mind one pointedly on a focus. So how do we do that? How do you develop that ability to rest the mind one pointedly on a focus? This is what we call samadhi. This is the actual meaning of the word samadhi. The ability to rest your mind right there. How do you develop that? Well, you need to get away from all the different distractions. And so that's why the second stanza reads, with solitude of body and mind, distraction won't occur. So you should thus forsake the world and also give up discursive thoughts. So here, this is what we are, what do we say? There are two different things we need, because when you think about it, we've got the actual meditation, but before you're going to do the meditation, you have to be in a position where you're able to meditate. And when we're beginners, we aren't able to meditate just anywhere. It's like, someone like Mingyur Rinpoche, for example, when he first came back from his retreat, when he was wandering for 4 years, and he came back and he came with the Kajun Mullam, no matter what happened, he was just sitting there. I can't even do an imitation. I mean, I don't even look like I'm in samadhi compared to him. You know, I'm pretending to be in samadhi. He was just right there. Just right there the whole time, because he was an experienced meditator. But he didn't start out that way. He started out as a kid with, a panic disorder, right? As he will always, he came through Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, and so this is, you can't expect to start out to be on that level of a great master, or the Vajra Vidya or the Karma or whoever. We aren't on that level yet. We're beginners. And so what do we need to do? Well, we need to have the two types of solitude of body and the solitude of mind. In other words, you have to take a break from the things that distract you if you're going to develop any meditation. So there are two different types of this solitude. The first is the solitude of the body, and this essentially means withdrawing from society, going to a retreat place, a place where you can actually do a retreat. And then the second is the solitude of mind, which is learning how to deal with all the different types of thoughts, primarily thoughts of desire, that keep us from being able to actually rest our mind and focus when we're in meditation. So we need to have these two types of solitude of body, solitude of mind. And so therefore we should renounce the world, or forsake the world, and also give up discursive thoughts. This is talking about, important to remember here, we're talking about beginners. Because if you don't do this when you're a beginner, you're never going to get to the stage where you are able to do this, like Milarepa. Milarepa after he left Marpa, then he went into the mountains and he just made this vow, I'm going to stay here until I achieve enlightenment. And he did, at an incredible cost to his body, but he achieved enlightenment. He didn't care what was happening with his body. Let him turn green, fine. Eat too many noodles and turn green, it's fine for Milarepa. He didn't care. Everyone else was horrified. But he was happy. And then he realized that he'd realized everything and that it was time for him to go and benefit other people. Later, he had disciples. I don't know why I feel like telling Milarepa stories this weekend. Rechungpa, we had two main disciples. So for those of you who are newer and don't know about Milarepa and his disciples, he had two main disciples. One is Rechungpa, who was like the moon, and then there was Gampopa, who was like the sun. Rechungpa was like, he was the one who always mucked up. So, Rechungpa met Milarepa when Rechungpa was like 15, 16 years old, spent many years with Milarepa. They were like inseparable in some ways. At some point, Rechungpa said, okay, I think it's time for me to go off and start teaching other people. And Milarepa said, why bother? You're not going to benefit anyone. Go off and meditate more in the mountains and become a Buddha first. Then you're actually going to be able to benefit people. I mean, for all of us, we'd look up at Rechungpa and say, wow, a great master. And Milarepa's like, you haven't become a Buddha yet. You got to go off and meditate in the mountains and then once you're a Buddha. Far better to do that than to go out and waste your time trying to teach people. So why am I not listening to this advice myself? So this is what we have to do. You have to develop your own qualities. And you have to, before you can actually go and actually really truly benefit someone, you have to develop the qualities within yourself that we can develop. Any of us can do it if we decide we want to. So that's what we're talking about. So taking time away from all the things that distract us from practice, so you can devote yourself entirely to practice. That being said, you have to get to the point where you're going to be able to do it, because if you all go off into Baxter State Park or climb Mount Katahdin and look for a cave, and you don't have the right instructions to begin with, you're going to get cold. You're going to get hungry. You might be lucky to have a cave where you can eat nettles, like Milarepa. Or you might be subsisting on something else, oak leaves, acorns. Pretty bitter, but nutritious. Anyways, I guess they probably don't grow that far north in Mount Katahdin. You might be living off of pine cones, I don't know. Anyways, you have to be ready for it. So we have to look at it. So in some sense, because I'm completely aware that, I live in a monastery, I don't live in a mountain. You all live in Portland and the environments, or wherever you live. You're not living in a retreat center. And so you have to get yourself ready that you're going to be able to go off and do this, which means that if you have to think about the benefits of it, you have to understand it. But at some point, it is necessary for us to take time. There are organized ways to do it, like shorter retreats that many of you have done in the past and may hopefully do in the future, and or some of the medium sort of term retreats, like the 3-year retreat, or you can do a long retreat. And then you get to the point where you're actually able to meditate on your own, and that's when you can go off in the mountains. So you need to get the instructions and be ready to do it before you do it. That's why we go. That's why you have the process of going through shorter retreats, medium retreats, longer retreats, study to get the view and so forth. And then you're at the point where when you know what you're doing, that's when you can go off. And at that point, it's right for you to renounce the world. But even before you're ready to do that, you need to start to take the world less seriously and consider it less important than, not give it as much importance as we tend to. And that's a lot of what the first half of this chapter is about. We don't get too deluded by our attachments to the world and to the speckled axe, or to that coffee place in Stevenson that begins with an R that has a fake Italian name that I can't ever remember, and the Basque cheesecake there. Right. So before we get too attached to things like that, So now it is about 8:15 this evening. So I think that is enough on the text tonight. We've been through 2 stanzas. And so tomorrow we'll start talking about the 2 aspects of forsaking the world, gaining solitude of the body by forsaking the world, and then the aspect of gaining solitude of mind by giving up discursive thought. So that's what we'll speak about tomorrow. But before we do that, one thing that has happened recently is, I don't know how many of you have been watching the Gyalon Karmapa's teachings. There's the spring teachings where this happened. After one of the sessions, the Gyalon Karmapa mentioned a long life prayer that he had written for Khenpo David Rinpoche. And I thought I would maybe share that story. Some of you might not have listened to the Karmapa's teachings, and so it's good to get this and to hear the story. And I mean, I'm not like I can tell like the Karmapa does, but it was August of 2019. One night, His Holiness had a dream. And what he said during the spring teachings, it's not like he has prophetic dreams. He's not one of these people who always have these dreams. You read about stories of Marpa and all these Kaiju masters who have all these prophetic dreams. You read about it in the biographies of many of the previous Kaiju masters, that they have all these prophetic dreams. And His Holiness said that he rarely has dreams like that. But on that evening, on that night, he dreamt that he was giving Rinpoche a long life offering. And as he was giving the long life offering, he was reciting a long life prayer, a 3-stanza long life prayer. When he woke up in the morning, he remembered it. So he wrote it down. And then shortly after that, he had it translated into English and Chinese. But it wasn't quite right. The time wasn't quite right for it to spread widely. And so it wasn't widely publicized. It was there. I mean, it wasn't totally secret, but it wasn't really publicized. And so it just kind of sat there for a while. And then a few weeks ago, and this was kind of a blur for me. I don't remember exactly which time it was, but I know it was sometime during the spring teachings. So it must have been sometime in what, March, April? I don't remember anymore. It was all kind of a blur. He had the strong feeling that it's important for us to recite it for Rinpoche now. And that if we do so, it'll be beneficial. So we'll recite this prayer now. And I think all of you who are here have it in your books? Yes. Can you look up the page? And I need to get it ready to show to everyone online. And it was kind of a last minute decision to do this, so I haven't done this. I have to look through my computer, go to where it is. Now, you all have a long life prayer for the Gyalon Karmapa too, is that correct? The short one is the Michita Paranja Chikipo. So we will start out by reciting, and do you have the Dalai Lama as well? Yeah. So we will recite the long life prayers for the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Gyalon Karmapa. And then we'll recite this prayer for Trungpa Rinpoche 3 times. We'll recite it twice in Tibetan and once in English. Okay. And then we will end with the closing chants. And so His Holiness said that it's important for us to recite this prayer now at this particular time. In Rinpoche's 90 years by Tibetan counting, 88 by Western. He's got a lot of energy for continuing to turn the wheel of Dharma. This is another thing His Holiness said there. So many lamas of Rinpoche's generation have passed away already. And of the ones who are left, like Khenpo Rinpoche, they're not all teaching the Dharma. But Rinpoche is still teaching the Dharma 3 days a week, giving his transmissions, which they're not a good time of the night for, they're like 10 to midnight here on the East Coast, so it's a difficult time. And so I understand, it may be difficult to receive the transmissions, but Rinpoche is giving these teachings, and he's got a lot of energy for giving the teachings, but he is still 88 years old. And anyone who's 88 is going to have, it's old. And this is just the fact of, this is what Rinpoche is showing us now. And so it's important for us, especially, to pray for Rinpoche's long life now, so that he can be able to continue turning the wheel of the Dharma, performing activity to benefit sentient beings in this world now, helping us, benefiting us. I can digress, right? Before we say these prayers. What is happening now with all the transmissions that Rinpoche is giving is after a few months into the pandemic, then Khenpo Habu and a lot of the other Khenpos, and particularly Khenpo Gelong Tsering, had been really thinking about, well, Rinpoche has given all these teachings, and he's had so many writings that he's written and books that he's compiled and put together. And Steve says something about the number of books that I published. It's nothing compared to what Rinpoche has written over his life. And in order for those teachings to be, what do we say to them, for them to be propagated to the future, Rinpoche has to transmit them to us. And so has been going through and giving 3 days a week. He's been giving the reading transmission of all of his works, so that we will be able, we who are in Trangul Monastery, so particularly for us Khenpos, it's our responsibility to preserve these into the future. We're the ones who have to compile and put together, keep Rinpoche's teachings, and then pass them on to the next generation. That's our job. It's my job, one of my jobs. So we've been putting together, editing his works again, putting them together, and we all have different roles all of us Khenpos have different roles that we're playing in this process, and we're putting them together and making texts for Rinpoche to recite and to read, give us the transmissions, and then once they do that, we give it a final proofreading. We're going to make books and pages in Tibetan, and there are a number of the texts that are worth translating into English if I ever get the time. Or if I ever get helpers. And hopefully I will have more. I've got some people who are interested, and I'm really looking forward to having more, so we can have more of Rinpoche's teachings. Not only teachings that are just that, okay, we transcribed the English, but actually Rinpoche edited them. Rinpoche looked at them and said, yes, this is what I want. Whether they're transcripts of teachings that Rinpoche then edited, or whether they're his own works, or things that he compiled from other things. He's written a lot of really wonderful biographies. Steve and I were talking about it. There's a sequence of biographies of all the Kagyu masters from Tilopa, and it traditionally ended with Situ Chugijune. Now then Beltso and Kuja added a few more after Situ Chugijune. So it was like just up to the 13th Karmapa. But of course that was 18th century. So there were none for the 19th and 20th century masters, late 18th, 19th, 20th century masters. So Rinpoche wrote these biographies, and he wrote these mostly in the 1970s and 80s. And they're wonderful biographies. When you read the biographies of all the masters by Situ Chugijune and Belatso and Kuchap, I'm sorry, these Tibetan names, great Tibetan masters. The biographies are really dry. They're like historical records of what they did and where they taught, who they got teachings from. And it's all very, very important historical information, but these are not the biographies that are fun to read. And then you get Rinpoche's biographies. And there's some life to them. There's something really special about these biographies Rinpoche wrote. And he took all the existing sources. It's not like he didn't make anything up. So, you've got the Life of Milarepa by Tsangyen Hiroko, the version that we know. And this is kind of actually, to be completely honest, it's like a historical novel. There are other more reliable sources if you want something factual. Sangha Niharakas is very beneficial. It's a great work. I'm not looking down on it by saying it's a historical novel. But Rinpoches aren't like that. He's taking the actual sources, he's putting together, and he's making these kind of stories of these masters' lives that are really, you know, especially after you've got the list of, and then and they don't even tell the name of the master. You've got the name of the master at the beginning, and because it's in Tibetan, it's like, and then went to there, met Katok Rinpoche, met this Rinpoche, received this, offered that, received this, and you don't even get the name of the Lama for page after page after page. It's a list of, you know, the went there, did this, gave that empowerment, received this teaching, no, nothing interesting. Then Rinpoche's Bhag, it's like real interest, really interesting things. And then another section are all of the teachings, or many of the teachings that Rinpoche has given that have now been transcribed, edited in Tibetan. Rinpoche has looked them over. Some have already been published in English, and I kind of wish we could go back and look at them again now that Rinpoche's got the full, the actual teaching. And so there's a great wealth of work that Rinpoche has really put his entire life's work that is now being collected and put together in Tibetan, and then now it's sharing with all of us. But he's not done. And so we need to pray for him to be able to live long and to continue, not just through the cycle of giving these transmissions, but to continue turning the wheel of Dharma for us into the future. And so please, thinking this way, we will now recite the long life prayers for the Dalai Lama and the Karmapa, and then we will do the prayer for Rinpoche. And for those of you watching online, I will share my screen so that you can watch it online. Have I got permission to share screen? Am I a co-host? No. Give it.
Well, let's see. More. I'll make you a co-host.
Yeah, that's the easiest way usually.
I think that should be.
I'm the co-host now. Okay.
Okay.
So with the Dalai Lama first. Chapter 10 your chi. Mare Senge Cheni Tsoshe So Jatan Yase Tuo Shenam Dam Fatan Dranson Drupa Nangitum Ragi Hasan Gewe Dentogi Jijen Mumba Geme Rujoche Same Yeshe Tanve Tuzene Chime Tse Bombar Kyowe Yamye Sungjo Chagi Lezenpa Sewa Pa Mebe Geletso Jime Tawe Gejan Chedrashim Londo Chugi Yura Siteva Kezon Drupe Luto Yonzoba Mare Senge Keni Tsoshe So Jadanya Se Tuo Chenam Dam Latan Ransom Drupa Nangitu Dagi Hasan Gewe Dentogi Jishen Mumba Geme Drudyoji. Between your hands united in equipoise, you hold the vase of deathlessness that collects the nectar of the highest undefiled wisdom. Lord of life, Dhyus, grant auspiciousness. Far and wide you sound the roar of a fearless you. Up to the peak of existence blazes your turquoise mane of the Dharma of scripture and realization. You have perfected the physical strength of being learned, venerable, and accomplished. Lion of speech, I ask you to live long. By the power of the victors, of their foremost offspring, of gods and sages and siddhas, and by the strength of the truth of my pure intentions, may my prayer be accomplished without any obstacles. Sanande tamje sevani tome vedanam pamchenem By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free all wanderers from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. All right, thank you very much. Good to see all of you live and over Zoom. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.